The Lovely Bone starts with this girl named Susie Salmon, who is 14 years old, and she lives in a small town in Pennsylvania with her parents, Jack and Abigail, her sister Lindsay, her brother Buckley, and her dog Holiday. She goes to school and she's in the ninth grade, and every time she gets out of school, she goes to her house before sundown so her parents don't worry about her. On December 6, 1973, Susie Salmon is walking home from school when she encounters Mr. Harvey. He tells her that he built an underground den for the neighborhood kids so they could play inside. At first, she says no and tells him that her mother is waiting for her and she doesn't want to get there late, and he says that she's already late, so what's the problem? Then she says yes, and she goes with him to the den. Inside, she gets a strange feeling when he starts to tell her that she's pretty and to take her coat off, and she starts to get uncomfortable. After that, Susie was right about the strange feeling she got when she entered the den, because he ends up raping and killing Susie. After all this time waiting to see if Susie was gonna get home, her parents start to worry about her even more than before and start calling her friends and asking around to see if they've seen Susie. Then her parents call Len Fennerman, who is the detective, to find Susie. While Susie's parents are looking for her, Mr. Harvey has already raped and killed Susie, and he's disposing her body. And he's already cleaned any clue that the police can find when they interrogate him. The police go to his house and interrogate him, but he acts like he's innocent and he acts like he's worried about Susie. Then notices that he left her charm bracelet on the table, but Len Fennerman doesn't notice. So George Harvey gets a chance to hide the bracelet. The Salmon family is still trying to figure out if Susie is alive or not, but they still have hope. But that hope is crushed when Detective Fennerman comes to the house with her hat, the winter hat she was wearing, and he tells them that he found her elbow and the hat with a lot of blood surrounding it. And Jack still had the hope that she could live without an elbow. But Jack has accepted that she's dead, but he wants to find out who the killer is, so he wants to help Detective Fetterman to find who the killer is. And he starts to suspect Mr. Harvey, but Len Fetterman doesn't have any evidence, and they already interrogated him. He said that he's weird, but they don't have any evidence to show that he's the killer. And Lindsay, Susie's sister, hears about her father's suspicion, so she breaks into Mr. Harvey's house and gets all the evidence she needs to show that he killed her. And she also finds new information about how he killed the other girls that have gone missing through the years. Lindsay gets out of the house before Mr. Harvey notices. But the police interview Mr. Harvey on Lindsay's break-in, and that afternoon when Len Fennerman is with Jack's wife Abigail because they're having an affair in the mall, Mr. Harvey packs his things and leaves town and leaves no traces. While all of this is happening, Susie is in the in-between where she's stuck in her perfect little world with her friend Holly that she met there. And she's been watching everyone from above. She's always thinking about how she never got to grow up on Earth and she never got to celebrate her 15th birthday or her 16th. So she chooses to mature and become a wiser 14-year-old because she never got to experience growing up on Earth. Susie's soul enters Ruth's body. Ruth is the girl that everyone finds really weird, and no one talks to her except Ray, who is Susie's crush because they kissed days before she died. And Ruth is also the girl her soul touched before dying. And when Susie's soul enters Ruth's body, she got to experience life on Earth again because Ruth and Susie swapped bodies, and Ruth is in the in-between now, and Susie is on Earth. Then Susie gets to experience many things with Ray, and Ray could somehow sense that it was Susie inside Ruth's body, so it was special for him too. Everything after this got better and better. Susie goes back to heaven, and Abigail, Susie's mom, goes back to her family after hearing about Jack's heart attack, and she decides to stay to at least be a good mother now than before because she was so caught up with Susie's death, and she didn't want to think about it, so she left. Buckley ends up forgiving his mother for leaving. Lindsay eventually gets married, and Ray becomes a doctor like his dad. Every family member has dealt with Susie's death in a different way, and they cut off all ties to her death so they could live a happier life without grieving. They still think about her, but they don't think about the bad times. They think about the good times they had with her. Susie lets go of her loved ones, and this lets her go to heaven, and this way she can enjoy her eternity there. Mr. Harvey is killed by an icicle that lands on his head, and then he stumbles and falls on a steep hill, and snow covers him so he's not visible, so no one is able to find him. The point of view is first person, who is Susie Salmon, who is basically a ghost telling the story. The first theme, passing of time. At first, the police care a lot about Susie's death and trying to find her body, but after the months go by and they start losing interest and they just assume that she's dead and they can't find who the killer is, so they just stop. The only one that still believes that they can find the killer is Jack, and Lindsay helps by breaking in to Mr. Harvey's house. The second theme is coping with grief. The family copes with Susie's death in a different way. Her mother, Abigail, decides that going away and distancing herself from her family will make her think less about Susie and make her not grieve in her death. On the other hand, there's Jack, who copes with his grief by thinking about Susie and trying to find her killer, and he never stops trying to find him. He even starts to suspect Mr. Harvey. Another theme is feeling guilt. We see a lot of guilt in the novel because of Susie's father, Jack, because he felt like he failed at being a father, and this feeling led him to try in every way possible to find Susie's killer. Susie Salmon is the hero and the ghost of the story because when she's 14 years old, she is beaten, raped, and murdered by Mr. Harvey. Jack Salmon is Susie's dad and is a frustrated hero because ever since his daughter went missing, he's tried everything to find her. When he comes to the conclusion that his daughter is dead and has been murdered, Len Fetterman can't do anything about Mr. Harvey because he interrogated him and he's weird, but he didn't find any evidence. Mr. Harvey is a sexual predator, rapist, and serial killer. He is Susie's 36-year-old neighbor who raped and killed her. He's killed animals to stop him from getting the urge to kill children. I rate this book 5 out of 5 stars because it taught me how this girl and her family went through so much pain because of their neighbor. I loved how the author expressed Susie's emotions and pain through the book and how angry she felt for what Mr. Harvey did to her. I see how predators are very good at acting normal and making it seem like everything's okay. Also, it made me realize how the book makes the phrase "don't talk to strangers" very important.